We've all been through it. You hear a word and you know there are multiple letters that can be used to spell it. How do you know what's what? Today I will talk about spelling tips. Shalom and welcome back to Hebrew Grammar Help. I have always been a good speller in English, so misspelling a word in Hebrew really gets to me. There is a lot of memorization involved, but there are also rules that can help you along the way. So we're going to start with Aleph versus Ayin. In modern Hebrew, they are both silent letters or they sound like a glottal stop. And so to the learner's ear, they sound basically like the vowel that goes along with them. So when you hear a word that ends with a vowel sound, especially if it's the ah sound, then it actually usually ends with a hey, not an ayin or an aleph. But if there is a vowel sound just before the ah sound at the end of the word, then it is most likely an ayin with a furtive patach. So yodea, manoa, erua, they all end with ayin. A lot of verbs have an ayin in the lamed position, which is the last position of the shoresh. And you can recognize them by their masculine singular form in the present tense because they'll have that ea sound. So a typical pa'al verb in the present tense has an oe vowel pattern, like lo med. You hear the oe vowel. So when you hear lo med, you hear that there's a dalet at the end. So it doesn't sound like it ends with that vowel sound. But if you hear the verb kore, it sounds like it ends with that vowel, the e vowel. And so you're missing a consonant sound at the end. So you don't actually know what that consonant could be. It could either be a hey or it could be an aleph. And in fact, there is a verb kore with a hey at the end, and there's a verb kore with an aleph at the end. But the one thing it can't be is ayin, because then it would be kore'a, because an ayin would always have that furtive patach. And in fact, all of these verbs are possible in Hebrew. Kore with a hey means it happens. And kore with an aleph means he reads. And then korea with an ayin means he tears. So when you're listening, you cannot hear the difference between the top two, kore, kore. But you can hear the difference in the last one. If you happen to hear it in the feminine singular, then ayin is going to have an at ending, whereas aleph is just going to have an et ending. So here we have kore, and then the feminine is kora. And for to read, we have kore, and the feminine is koret. And then to tear, it's korea and koraat. If you have a verb and one of these letters is in the pay position, so the first position of the shoresh, then it's easy to tell if you're hearing the infinitive. Most pa'al verbs have a lamed with an e sound. Li tov, li lemod, li kod. Pa'al verbs that have an aleph in that pay position have an e vowel pattern at the beginning. So le'echol, le'esof, le'ehov. Those all have an aleph. Or they can also have an irregular form like lomar. Pa'al verbs that are pe'ayin, that is, they have an ayin in that first position, have an a vowel pattern at the beginning of their infinitive. So la'asot, la'amod, la'anot. So if you hear le'e, you know that that first shoresh letter is an aleph. And if you hear la'a, then you know that first shoresh letter is an ayin. Okay, moving on. Bet without a dagesh sounds like a V, and one of Vav's sounds is a V. So how do we know the difference? Bet at the beginning of a word in modern Hebrew is always, always, always a B sound. Now, I know this is different in biblical Hebrew, and I don't exactly know all of the rules. It has to do with what came before it and all these things. But in modern Hebrew, a bet at the beginning is always a B sound. So if you hear a V at the very beginning of the word, it's going to be a Vav. Also, av, the sound of at the end of a word is a very common pronominal suffix that attaches to plural nouns and some prepositions. These words always end with a vav, and when written without nikud in modern Hebrew, they always have a yod before the vav to ensure that the reader says av and not o. So, for example, when you're saying something like his legs, the ending is going to be raglav, raglav, and that's going to be a vav ending. And this is not a hard and fast rule. There are verbs like katav, which end with a bet. And I'm sure there's all kinds of other words also that end with av and have a vet at the end. But if you hear it and it specifically sounds like it's the ending to a preposition, or you can hear a full other word before it and you think this might be his pronominal ending, then it's going to be a vav. So it's not just about the sound, it's about whether you can identify it as that pronominal ending. Now, chet versus chaf. Just like bet always sounds like a B at the beginning of a word, kaf also always sounds like a K sound, the plosive k sound at the beginning of a word. And again, this is in modern Hebrew. So if it sounds like ch at the beginning of a word, then it is definitely a chet. At the end of a word, ach, the sound ach, is always going to be chet. And it's usually going to be a furtive patach again. And cha, if you ever hear cha, that's going to be a chaf sofit. Remember that the infinitive pa'al verbs usually start with the li sound, a lamed with an e vowel. If you hear li and then the next sound is ch in one of these pa'al verbs, then that's going to be a chaf. If the first letter of a shoresh is chet, then the infinitive of a pa'al verb is going to have the lach sound, kind of like with ayin. So lichtov has a kaf, and you can hear it because it's got that e. But lachtom has a chet, because that's why that a sound is there. Lachtom. Kaf is one of the endings for feminine words. So verbs like lomedet or feminine nouns that end with et or eat are all going to have taf at the end. Most foreign words or names that have a T sound in them are going to be transliterated with a tet. The exceptions are biblical names that have a taf in their original form and other names that have a th in them, like the name Thomas. Also, the taf is often transliterated as th into English. And so, if you are aware of a synagogue or another religious style place that has a th in its word, then it's probably a taf. So, a really common example of this is synagogues that are often called house of something. And in English, they're usually called Beth something. So, like Beth Shalom or Beth Or. And it's really in modern Hebrew, they would be pronounced Bet Shalom, Bet Or. Okay, Kof versus Kaf. Kof only has one sound, which is the K sound, K. But kaf can sound like a K sound, K, or it can sound like ch. Kaf always sounds like ch at the end of a word. So if we hear the K sound at the end of a word, it is definitely a kof. Samech versus sin. This one, there's no way to know. Samech always sounds like an S sound. And this letter here on the left sometimes sounds like a sh, like an SH, and sometimes sounds like an S. And sin and shin are different from the other letters that have two sounds, like bet and vet, kaf and chaf, pe and fe. Those letters have different sounds in different linguistic environments. And so there are rules and you can figure it out. And what that means is that different forms of a word that is related will have different sounds because of these rules. So, for example, I say lavo, meaning to come, and I say it with a V sound, lavo. But if I say I come, it's ba or ba'a, and that has a B sound. But this never happens with sin and shin. If a word has a shin, it has it in all forms of the word, and if vice versa with the sin. If it's has a sin, it's a sin everywhere. And this is because the difference between a sin and a shin is not a dagesh, right? It's a letter, it's a dot at the top, not in the middle. So what does this mean for us? It means that a sin sounding like an S can occur in all of the locations of a word, just like the S sound of a samech. And so we basically have to memorize these words. And the truth is that there are many homophones in Hebrew, words that sound alike but are spelled differently. And for example, here we have kol with a kof, which means voice or sound, and we have kol with a kaf, which means all, or each, or every. And then there's lo with an aleph, and lo with an aleph means no or not. And then lo with a vav, which means to him. And then there's bo with an aleph at the end, and bo without an aleph. Bo with an aleph means come, and bo without an aleph means in him or in it. And this is just a few. There are many, many others. So that's it for today. Hopefully, these tips will help you to remember how to spell some words without having to look them up. I look up words all the time. There's no shame in that, but it does slow me down. As usual, if you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments and I will do my best to respond. And also, if you have some aspect of Hebrew grammar that has you flummoxed, let me know and I will do my best to explain it in a future video. Hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot bapa'am haba'a. See you next time.